Hey Kathy, so this is just a short introductory video. I have another longer video lecture for you on Beowulf, the first half. It's going to go into greater detail about the language and just important developments. This should be about 10 minutes, just going to give you some introductory information so that you're in a better position to start reading Beowulf, and then also to watch the other much longer and more tedious lecture. So Beowulf was composed it's generally agreed that it was composed in the 8th century, and the author is not known, but what is important is that it is agreed by pretty much all scholars that the poet who wrote Beowulf was Christian. And then he was writing about a previously existing heroic society that was several hundred years in the past. So the reason it's important to know that this poet was Christian is because he is writing about this heroic society, this pagan warrior culture, and this, I'll just refer to it as the heroic society, have very different values than Christian. The values of the heroic society are very different from Christian values. For example, heroic society, there's tremendous value on material objects like treasure and gold, which is often gained through warfare. And because life in heroic society is centered around war, so there is a constant. All of life, I guess, is focused around war because it's really the only constant. So there is definitely a tremendous influx of treasure, because that comes with, I guess, being the winner of war. But then at times one can be expected to be on the losing side. So treasure is very much associated with war and with winning war. So material things and gold are sought and valued very highly. One's reputation, which is gained through fighting and fighting very well, that's something else that is valued. The most important relationship in heroic society was that between a warrior or a thane and his king or lord, and the warrior would fight to the death for that king if necessary, and he was rewarded by that king or lord. And then the king or lord would, let's say, provide shelter and food on a daily basis for the warrior. But then, let's say, in times of of battle or war, there would be even greater rewards for that warrior. So for men, I guess you could say the most important relationship would be that between you and your king. But what about women? Another thing you'll see in Beowulf that I noticed the first time I read it is that there really aren't many women. But I'll get to that in a minute. So another very important relationship would be that between two warriors or kinsmen. So let's say you and I are kinsmen, we're fighting together, and you get killed by the enemy. It is my responsibility to get your man price, and that would be what you are worth based on your fighting ability. So what about women? Women, other than Grendel's mother, don't really appear very often. We'll see maybe a king's wife here and there serving wine, but there actually was a more important role for women, and that was as peace weavers. So kind of like the name implies, there would be two tribes that were feuding, and there would be, let's say, a young woman and a young man, one from each tribe, and the idea would be that if you married them, there could be peace between these two feuding tribes. And so the peace weaver, the woman who is used to achieve peace between two tribes, is actually something that is used a lot in this literature, but it doesn't ever work. And in Beowulf, what's interesting is that there aren't ever peace weavers that fit into the plot, but they're sort of, how can I say this? They're referenced twice. There are two references to peace weavers, and in both, one is a song that's sung at a celebration, and it's very sad. It's about this woman who's used as a peace weaver, and it doesn't work, and the old feuds between the two tribes come back, and the woman loses her husband and her brother and her son. And then the other, Beowulf, is having a side conversation with his king, and it's just about how, no matter how great the woman is, it never works. Marriage and love never work to heal feuds. So in terms of heroic society, again, they value physical prowess and reputation and the glory that one earns in battle and material wealth, and also vengeance is really important. So if someone you love dies, the thing to do is not to mourn, but to avenge that person's death. So Christianity is, on the other hand, forgive. Christianity encourages us to forgive our enemies. Christianity doesn't encourage material wealth. So you can see how those two value systems conflict. And so in Beowulf, the poem, there's a lot of times where the poet has one of the pagan characters like Beowulf, or one of the kings praise God or thank God. So you just have to watch for that, because it may seem as you're reading like, oh, Beowulf is Christian, he believes in God. No, the majority opinion is that the poet is inserting his beliefs, that he's using his characters to voice them. So when you see a character thanking God or praising God or just talking about God in general, something that you want to ask is, is this the poet inserting his beliefs, or is this coming from one of the characters? And most often you'll see, if you evaluate the character's behavior, you'll see that the Christian values aren't really consistent with, or what the character is saying at one time isn't really consistent with his behavior over the longer term. So that is important to remember. And something else that's also important to think about, again, the majority position of scholars is that Beowulf is overall more critical of heroic society, that it's not, contrary to popular opinion, it's not a happy celebration of heroic society, that is more of a critique of heroic society and a critique of this way of life that the poet was fascinated by, because he did choose to write about these people and this society, but he is often he is often definitely criticizing this society. So here is a quote from H.L. Rogers, and just to give you his evaluation of the poem, he says, "The poet saw the heroic past of the Danes and the Geats through the eyes of a Christian Anglo-Saxon. In his poem, heroic material and worldly things all fail." So before I should summarize Beowulf before reading that quote, if you haven't read Beowulf, in short, it is the tale of the Danes and the Geats. And the Danes are being terrorized by Grendel, who is this evil monster who hears them celebrating in their hall. And he attacks for 12 winters, and for 12 winters, no one in this warrior society is strong enough or bold enough to stand up to Grendel, and even the king, Hrothgar, cannot do anything. And then Beowulf over in Geatland hears about this, and he decides that he's going to set sail to where the Danes live, which is not called Denmark. Well, I don't know if it is, but Beowulf decides that he's going to sail over there, so he does, and he presents himself to King Hrothgar, and Hrothgar gives the okay, says that Beowulf can fight Grendel, and So Beowulf fights Grendel and he actually defeats him, and everything seems great. But then Grendel's mom comes to avenge her son's death. So Beowulf has to fight Grendel's mom, but he defeats her too. And he goes back to Geatland and he becomes king, and he's king for 50 years. And then a dragon comes and destroys everything. And Beowulf has a third fight, and he's not as victorious in this third fight. But so you could say that it is 3 fights fought by this great warrior, but I would say that it's more like the beginning of his life and the later years. So when we see Beowulf in the beginning of his life, when he's a warrior, that's where he is victorious, and he becomes prideful, and he becomes, I would say, arrogant. He becomes arrogant. And then we see him in the second stage of his life where he's king. And it is there that his arrogance catches up to him, and it costs him his life. So I kind of, let's see how you see it. But that's how I see it. It's also important to note that Beowulf begins with a funeral and it ends with a funeral. So it has a somber, elegiac tone. I'm just going to read you the quote from H.L. Rogers again. And he's saying that the poet who wrote Beowulf saw the heroic past of the Danes and Geats through the eyes of a Christian Anglo-Saxon. And in his poem, heroic material and worldly things all fail. And then another quote, this is from the translator, Seamus Heaney. He writes that the entire poem could be viewed as the poet's lament for heroes like Beowulf who went into the darkness without the light of the poet's own Christian faith. So those are 2 scholars who definitely see this as very somber and sad in tone because of the death and the constant cycle of war. But anyway, you don't have to see it that way. I think the best thing for you to do when you start reading this is just pay attention to the poet and try to get a sense of his view of heroic society. Do you feel like he's critical of it, or is he celebrating it? Is he commemorating it? That should be enough to keep, I don't want to talk too much. And okay, so anyway, I hope this is helpful for you as you get started with Beowulf. The next lecture is much longer and more detailed. You don't have to watch it all, just watch it until when it stops helping you, just turn it off. And I hope the reading questions are helpful, and that's it. Happy reading. Bye.